ADHD special interest versus autistic special interest, because this is one of those things that kind of threw me off. ADHD special interest, they're very likely to be short-term and you're likely to have a million of them, whereas autistic special interests have traditionally been described as something where you kind of start that from jump, you have it for life. It's going to be long-term, you probably have a few. Those are a lot of differences. I didn't really associate some of my short interests with that term. The autistic vernacular and the diagnostic vernacular kind of meaning you're basically married to that interest for the rest of your life. So I never really thought of some of my short-term interests as being like that. But the more I get used to myself, my autistic brain, my ADHD brain, all the traits, and I'm listening to other people's stories and their experiences, I'm realizing they always were. I always had a lot of short-term special interests. Everything I'm about to say is both what clarified it for me eventually in my journey and what originally confused me. On the concept of the long-term autistic interests, I've always had a handful of interests. Part of the way that those link in to my ADHD interests that have been shorter term by comparison, all of my life, the main interest has fed into smaller term interest, a subcategory of the autistic main interest that's lasted all of my life. They don't have to be linked, but they tend to be linked. A good example of some really short-term interests, there are so many of them I can't begin to imagine because it's been a long enough life that I don't even know. One that I think is pretty amusing lasted for, it was probably something like 1 or 2 hours one night. Mating season had arrived for bugs. Crickets. The crickets. I can't believe how loud the crickets are. I ended up lying there clicking on this particular video with crickets in a cup. I'm watching crickets crawling up onto each other, enjoying life while they're living it. Another example of a short-term interest, a little while back, I almost decided randomly because of ADHD impulsivity, I just decided I needed to buy 3 to 5 ocarinas. And the reason why I suddenly came from a life where I never had an interest in ocarinas to just instantaneously, I had found shops. I was in the process of researching different shops, return policies, and buyer experiences, and I had filled my cart with 5, possibly 6 ocarinas. But I decided I need these. They're fascinating. I like the sound. I was listening to people playing them. I was comparing between different materials. Oh, there's all kinds of stuff that can be made out of wood, out of different clays. Apparently there's some type of purple clay, and I was just into it. You've got the soprano range, which I was a little afraid of because apparently they can get so high-pitched that if you play it and you don't know what you're doing, you could accidentally harm your own hearing. So I was like, maybe I don't need a soprano one. But I also was like, if you buy it now and you get the free shipping and there's a bit of a discount, I can sit it here, I can learn how to play, and then I can put in earplugs or something and learn how to do it safely. They have something that's called, I don't know if it's called a baritone or if it's called a bass one, but they have these different levels, and they're like vocal terms, soprano and alto, and I just wanted to get the entire range. They were really pretty. Some of these had great designs. One of them, I just love the Little Mermaid. I've always had the mermaid thing when I was a child. I was called Mermaid because another one of my interests has always been swimming, and I took to it naturally. A series of other stories involved with that, but I took to it naturally, and I was called either the mermaid or the dolphin as a child. I loved mermaids and dolphins. But one of these ocarinas was shaped like the shell from the Little Mermaid where her voice was held. And without getting into that, I've been through a lot of stuff in my life with my voice being literally or figuratively going through different phases of not having it or having it challenged and having to heal. So it had all this meaning to me at that time in my life. So now I'm just entranced by this new music sub-interest because it's a musical instrument. It's an ocarina. I was like, I've heard of this all of my life. Also, not surprisingly, you can run into a lot of ocarinas of time, which was weird because I'd never played Zelda at the time, but it's the kind of thing where I feel like people who've never played Zelda will still have heard of the Ocarina of Time. So I'd heard of it, and I was amazed when I was shopping the actual instrument how many producers had produced one that looks like the thing in the game, specifically for the fandom to buy. I guess they're making a lot of money off of people who otherwise weren't interested in ocarinas, but got interested in that way, and that's not how I got into it. I don't even remember how I got into it. Come to think of it, it just kind of came. I think I was shopping for other musical instruments that I thought would be fun and small and like a nice, that's what it was. I wanted a stem, and I wanted a musical stem that was easy to play with. And for some reason, tiny percussive handheld instruments suddenly turned into ocarinas, and I was obsessed. So I researched those nonstop for weeks. I was constantly in the process of getting it done. I'm going to make this purchase. I've got to get them. I need to get them here as quickly as possible because I have to learn how to play ocarinas immediately. The funny thing is, the way that this all ended is that I ended up buying one, just a small, cute one to test it. I had a sneaking suspicion I wasn't going to like the sound because, without going into detail, I pick up on sound in a really intense way. I decided that the best option for me was ceramic, and I kept thinking a ceramic ocarina was going to have, like, I'm thinking about it, this is how I process things, that material is highly porous, it's going to absorb sound and moisture in a very specific way. It's something I can visualize. I can visualize the sound waves breaking and hitting and the pores of it and how it's going to fluctuate and how it was going to sound. So I got one to test it, and in person found out don't really like the sound that much. I like it better in a recording, but in person I could hear the material. The wind across the ceramic was really bothering me, but that didn't occur to me until I had found 5 to 7 ocarinas, stacked them in a cart, and was just about to make the purchase. I almost made the purchase probably 10 to 15 times, and I just kept thinking I need to research more. I need to research this more. And I'm glad that I did, because I didn't buy any of them. But that's a lot of information. I realize it's a lot of information, but it's not close to the amount of information I absorbed during the time frame, because I was just like, oh my gosh, why look, in these tiny instruments there's this little thing, and it's like I don't have any pipe-like things right now. I don't have something like this. This is fun. I want to collect, and I'm getting back into being myself after a lot of experiences in life. So I'm like, I love music. This is music. Gotta get one. Obsessed with ocarinas for just a few weeks, listening to everything I could, and then never bought one because it turns out in person, I mean, I bought one small one just to try and hear the material, and it turns out I don't like the sound. Not in person. In person, that is not my thing. So I kind of dodged a bullet there, because I was about to just go for it and pull it and get them all done. I was about to start collecting, and I had 5 to 7 that I was going to buy that day. And I had about another 4 that I definitely wanted from the same website. And there might have been 3 to 5 on another website that I wanted to get. I was into it, and it was exciting. Then it just went away. I heard it, and it was disappointing, but I was really glad I hadn't made the purchase, because I almost forgot. I know I want the information before I buy something or get into a new thing. I've learned this about myself. I don't know why. It might be that autistic part of my brain that wants to put the reins, pull the reins and slow down and calm myself, because I was like, oh my gosh, day one, saw the ocarina, started researching it, found it really fascinating, and I immediately, before I even finished listening to the instrument and all that it could do, I just started searching for a shop online where I could buy a nice one. And I was just about to buy it repeatedly, and I kept holding myself back. So I do that a lot in life, by the way, as a subcategory. Maybe I'll talk about the impulsivity later. But a lot of my interests involve stuff I can buy. And sometimes it's really hard not to make a long-term or permanent purchase. It's not permanent like you can never get rid of the thing, but it's permanent like you buy it and you can't return it 3 months later or 3 years later when you realize that that interest was never going to fly. So I put a lot of work into making sure that I balance the impulsivity that is really sparkly and new when it's attached to a brand new cool object I can get. And I want the object, but it's also attached to a brand new top interest that I'm all the way into a special interest that I'm just so excited by. I really love a matching accessory. I love an excuse to have an accessory that matches my interest, and I think that's another thing I'll get into, because it seems like there's this connection with female autists and collecting. I've heard about this, and I've heard other people say this is like a specific, autistic woman thing, autistic female thing, and I have that experience. So I will be talking about that later, but I love an accessory that to match my interest, to match a subject, whatever it is, even if it's a color. If I have a new interest and I can find an accessory for it that is in my color scheme that I just like in life, I don't know why, that excites me to the point where it's almost impossible not to buy it. And then my whole life is about trying to find a reason to buy it. Now, I want to be clear. This is not a thing where it's a horrendous issue in my life. And I understand that for some people it can become a bigger issue, and that's not what I'm laughing at. I'm laughing at myself because I know that for me, this is more like a fun thing. Sometimes it can be really overwhelming and tempting, but it's not a nightmare. But I'll talk about all that stuff later. I probably want to make a note because I just mentioned 2 things and I've already forgotten them because that's more ADHD brain. But I'll try to remember once I finish recording this, because if I take a note, I don't know what's going to happen. I think I've finished everything that I want to say on this subject, but all of a sudden new things are coming to me, so I keep wanting to throw out more examples of those short-term interests. And long story short, those short-term interests that I had, and knowing that there's supposed to be a delineation when I was looking at it, either you're autistic or you're ADHD. Here's the difference. Here's how the interests work. And that's only one of the subjects with the crossover, because there's other stuff like stimming. But this is how it really kind of confused me, because no matter what I did, and they're saying you're going to know, it'll be clear. Either you have a million tiny interests that don't necessarily last for very long, or you have a handful that last all of your life through. So I was like, well, obviously, if it's either or, I knew that I had the lifelong interests as an autist because I remember them, and most of them have been there since infancy and they've never changed. They've sprouted other interests as subcategories, which is probably both related to the autistic, the way the interest works. If I'm just autistic and I have a special interest, and then I discover a new aspect of it, I might be interested in that for a while, and it doesn't, that one subcategory doesn't suddenly become a top interest itself that's on the level with everything else necessarily. But then sometimes when that sub-interest, when there are 5 of them, when there are 10 of them, when they're related to those, I'm like, okay, this was confusion for me. The tiny interests are related to the larger autistic interests. So I was like, no, that's an autistic thing. It fits. If it's the category, because it's a subcategory of the bigger thing. But then I have a lot of them, like the crickets and locusts, and I'm like, I don't really have a pre-existing interest in bugs. I don't know if you can hear that right now. Cicada. If you can't hear that, I don't know what's wrong with life, because it just went up like a choir. Like somebody in the choir desperately is seeking attention, and the attention that they want is coming specifically from female cicadas. Somebody's male cicada is out there trying to stunt right now, picking up a girlfriend or a wife. Wifey. They're looking for a cicada waifu. The struggle is real, but it won't be real for long, because okay, I talked and my battery went out, so I changed my battery, but it's fine. I'm just over here calling crickets and cicadas obnoxious because they're doing what comes naturally. Birds do it, bees do it, even locusts in the trees do it. But what I'm saying is, there's no way I can call some of these interests subcategories of autistic interest, because I have no interest. Even if I accidentally ended up watching crickets getting busy in a cup one day, that wasn't what I was going for, and it actually kind of made me think I was exhausted. I had had enough. I was angry at all the tiny little animals and all their little noises. I was trying to find some nice, humane way of making them go far, far away, and now I end up seeing them getting busy in a cup. I was like, that's it. That actually ended it for me. it wasn't a subcategory of animal sexuality. It was the end to a subcategorical interest in crickets and locusts and mating seasons. So that's not something that sprang forth from anything else. I've had a whole life. I wish I could remember more of them, but this video is going to be long enough already. I've had a whole life of small interests like that, and they have been momentary ones for just a few days, sometimes a few minutes or a few hours. And I wouldn't the reason why I know that they are special interest capacity is because after all these years of thinking about it, feeling it, self-searching, learning, and being able to relate to people inside of the community, I realize my interest in this stuff. There's a reason why nobody else got it, nobody else understood. Everybody else thought this was weird because I had so many non-autists, so many allists in my life who didn't get it. That's a clue. Now that I'm in the community with people who are autistic and I can understand the larger special interests, I'm able to relate the difference between a fleeting fascination in something that's like, oh, okay, that's interesting, and a fleeting special interest where it's like, whoa, this has lit up my life. I need to delve more and understand. There's a type of joy. It's like the autistic joy thing. There's an ADHD joy, and I don't really hear people talking about that, but there is. I have both. I can't say what it's like if you're ADHD and you're an holistic ADHDer who's not autistic, but I am both autistic and ADHD, and this is why I'm talking about it. This is my experience. I kept looking for people who had this experience so I could better understand myself and clarify some things. So I knew how to dig. So I knew what it was like to have both experiences. So this is why I'm here. I want to try and make it easier for all of us to understand ourselves by being able to compare ourselves with other people who might be more similar to us. So if you are both autistic and ADHD, you can say, oh, you can know. It'll probably sound similar to you, at least in the grander scheme of things. But I don't remember if I finished my point. I just want to hit it real quick because I looked at my notes. A lot of my tiny interests that have lasted for a shorter time are not connected in any way I can see with my larger, longer interests. So they don't feel like they're an offshoot. It doesn't feel like it's a natural subcategory of the autistic interest. It felt like this is something different. It's a different energy. It's a different sensation. It's ADHD. And this helped me to understand so much. There's so many things that helped me clarify, and they mainly came from listening to other people's stories. So I'm putting this story out here so you can see what it is. And I have been trying to focus. This really helps me because I've been trying to focus on getting that. What I was going through in my life was coming out in my content. My content felt confused to me because I'm trying to talk about the difference between the ADHD experience and the autistic. I've been going autism over here. Let me fix that. I've been trying to talk about the difference between the autistic experience and the ADHD experience because that's what was going on inside of me. I was trying to understand how they war at each other, because sometimes they war, but sometimes they come together in cohesion. Sometimes there's a symphony of things where it's both. And this is one of those places. I love my interest capability, even if sometimes it makes me want to go impulsively buy 5 to, 15 to 20 ocarinas when I've never put lip number 1 on ocarina number 1, just put my lips together and blow with it. I'd never done it. Even if sometimes the impulse is strong. I love that about me. I love that I can learn all of these things, and I love that I can stick with something throughout all of my life, and I also can see the beauty and joy in something for a short term. I don't feel like I'm losing interest and I can't hold interest. I feel like I'm having a whole specific capacity to love something for a moment that's not even one of my lifelong loves. It doesn't have to be, because I can see the beauty in anything. And I think that's a wonderful thing, and I want to share it. I'm excited to share it. This is part of how autism and ADHD combine beautifully for me, and I'm proud of it. I love it. I'm just not ashamed. And I want to highlight that. That doesn't, obviously, Obviously, that doesn't erase someone who isn't proud of it or who does feel ashamed. That would be that person's feelings. That's sacred. They're your feelings. That's your experience. But here are my feelings and my experience. So this is part of the beautiful cohesion between autism and ADHD, and autistic special interests and ADHD special interests. And my mouth is getting confused now, so now is a good time to close. If you've got any thoughts or anything to add or any examples, like what are your short-term special interests? What are your long-term ones? How do they combine? If you've got anything on that or anything to say, put them in the comments. If you think this will help anyone, please share. And remember to like, comment, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you know when I upload more videos. And that's about it. Bye now.